Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why some things stick in your memory and others just vanish? Well, today we're diving into how the way we say things, especially when describing something, can actually change how well we remember it. This study asks a really cool question. Does the order of words in a sentence affect how well we remember the information? Specifically, they looked at how describing something with an adjective before or after the noun changes our memory for that description. Think about it. Is a red car easier to remember than a car that is red? Or in languages like Czech, where you can say a white church or a church white? This research dives deep into that very question. The researchers noticed that while we know descriptions can make things more memorable, nobody had really checked if the position of the descriptive word itself made a difference. They thought that maybe putting the description after the thing being described could actually make it easier to remember. To figure this out, they ran 4 experiments using the Czech language. In everyday life, when we describe something like a big dog or a dog that is big, the words we use help us remember the dog better. But what if the way we arrange those words matters? Previous studies hinted that putting descriptive words after the noun might lead to stronger memories. However, those studies had some limitations. So, this team decided to do a direct comparison in Czech, a language that allows for descriptive words to be placed either before or after the noun. They used a simple recall test, asking people questions right after they read or heard a sentence to see what they could remember. So, how did they test this? In their first experiment, they showed people sentences on a computer screen, one sentence at a time. The sentences were about everyday things, and some had descriptive words before the noun, like a white church, and others had them after, like a church white. After reading each sentence, they asked a question about the description, like what color was the church? They then looked at how many people got the description correct. And here is what they found. In this first experiment, participants remembered the descriptions better when the adjective came after the noun. So, a church white was recalled more accurately than a white church. This was a significant result, meaning it is unlikely to be just a fluke. They also looked at how long it took people to read the sentences, but didn't see a big difference there. Because the reading speed didn't show a clear difference, they decided to try a slightly different way of presenting the sentences in experiment 2. This time, instead of showing the whole sentence at once, they showed it word by word. You press a button, and the next word appears. This way, they could measure the reading time for each specific word very precisely. They used the same sentences and the same recall questions. The results for recall accuracy were very similar to experiment 1. Again, people remembered the descriptions better when the adjective came after the noun. This reinforced their earlier finding. Interestingly, in this word-by-word reading, they did find that sentences with the adjective after the noun took a little longer to read in the parts of the sentence that came after the described item. This might suggest it takes a bit more processing to deal with that structure. Now, a question came up. Is this effect simply because putting adjectives after the noun is unusual in Czech? Some language structures are more common than others. If something is less common, it might stand out and be remembered better. Not because of the meaning, but just because it is different. To test this, they introduced a new type of description in experiment 3 instead of a regular adjective. They used a noun in a special grammatical form called the genitive, which also functions as a description. In Czech, these genitive descriptions usually come after the noun, just like the adjectives they were testing. So, they had sentences with hot cider adjective before and cider hot adjective after. And also Renata's cider genitive before and cider Renata's genitive after. If the advantage was just due to being unusual, then the Renata's cider version should be remembered better than cider Renata's. But that is not what happened. Just like with the adjectives, people remembered the genitive descriptions better when they came after the noun. This was a big clue. It means the advantage for postnominal descriptions isn't just because they're uncommon. Something else is going on. The recall advantage was consistent whether it was a regular adjective or a genitive modifier. To make sure their findings weren't just an artifact of reading on a screen, they conducted a 4th experiment using spoken sentences. They generated audio recordings of the sentences, again with descriptions before and after the noun. This time, participants just listened to the sentences and then answered the recall questions. This is much closer to how we experience language in everyday life. And guess what? The same pattern held true. Participants remembered the descriptions better when they were spoken after the noun. This was a really strong finding, showing that this effect is robust and happens whether we're reading or listening. So, what is the big takeaway from all of this? The researchers proposed an idea called discriminative learning. Imagine you are trying to learn what a yellow object is. If you first see a yellow yellow duck and someone says it is yellow, your brain might associate duck with yellow. But then, if you see a red duck and someone says it is red, and you were expecting yellow, that prediction error helps your brain learn to distinguish between yellow and red much better. The researchers think that when a noun comes first, like in church white, it primes your brain to look for features. Then, when the adjective white comes, your brain actively compares it to the features it is already thinking about for church. This competition, this error-driven learning, sharpens the representation of white in your memory. It makes it more distinct and easier to recall later. This research suggests that the order of words really does matter for memory. Putting descriptive words after the noun seems to create stronger, more memorable representations. It is not just about frequency or whether something is unusual. It is about how our brains learn by predicting and correcting. When the noun comes first, it sets up a situation where the following adjective has a better chance to become a really sharp diagnostic cue, leading to better recall. It is a fascinating peek into how our minds build and retrieve memories from language. This study highlights how subtle changes in language structure can have a significant impact on our cognitive processes. It makes you wonder about all the little ways language shapes our thoughts and memories without us even realizing it. What do you think about these findings? Does it change how you'll think about word order? Let us know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this dive into the mind, be sure to like this video and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more fascinating science explained. Simply, we'll see you next time.